Now, where PowerShell really shines is when it comes time to perform bulk actions on Active Directory or really against any kind of configuration on a machine or service. And so performing bulk Active Directory operations is one of the places where we can do some really nifty stuff if we've got the information in a format that can be consumed by one or more of these commands. Now, before we get into the PowerShell portion, because there's just one that I want to show you, I want to show you a couple of other commands that have existed in Windows for a very long period of time. These bulk operations commands Microsoft provides in order to either export out information or import in information, like to create multiple users at once. The first of which is a command called csv.de, which uses CSV files, or comma-separated values files, to go about performing these bulk operations. Now, as you can see here, CSV.de has a very long list of possible parameters that it can use for exporting or importing information. And in fact, the default for CSV.de is to export information unless you specifically choose to import things, which is a great thing because you don't want to accidentally import in a bunch of content. In order to export, just to do a simple export of your domain information, you can choose csv.de and then -f and then a file name, so output.csv. This command will output a CSV file that contains all the information that exists in Active Directory as it relates to users and computers. So we've actually output this information, so let's go ahead and run Notepad and take a look at that output.csv file that we just created. As you can see, it's got a whole lot of stuff baked in here. And if I remove let's say the word wrap is off, we can take a look at just the kinds of things that are in this comma-separated values file. Now, because the length of the lines is a little bit long, we're getting some line wrap over here. But as you can see on the top, we have the list of column names that are associated with this CSV that we've created, like distinguished name, the object class, the DN, the distinguished name over here, the instance type, when it was created, when it was changed. And these are represented down here for each individual account. So the lost and found container, the meetings container. And then all the way down here, I believe at the bottom, we should actually end up getting to some users and groups. So here's our domain admins group, for example. And here is our allowed RODC password replication group. Well, doing this simple output doesn't really provide us much in the way of useful information because even importing this into Excel to delete out all the uninteresting rows still provides us with a lot of stuff that's perhaps too much for what we need. Well, CSV.de allows you to kind of tailor what kinds of information you want to get out if you provide the appropriate parameters. One such parameter, which I'll show you, is csv.de -f output2.csv. And then here I can use the -d parameter to enter in first the container in Active Directory that I'm interested in. So the contents of a specific container as opposed to all containers. To do that, I'm going to need to provide a path to the container through LDAP, which in our case, let's choose the users container. This container is what we find over here, right there, the users container in Active Directory users and computers. The path for that container will be cn equals users, and then dc equals company, comma, dc equals pri. This will give me the contents of that users container. I could also use the -r parameter to identify just an additional filter that I would want to apply for the types of objects I'm interested in. So let's then filter this down just a bit further to just the user objects. So object class equals user. And if I run that correctly, that should give me just the 7 entries as opposed to the 246 entries that make up the entire domain. Well, let's take a look at that new output file that we just created, output2.csv. And as you can see, there are far fewer records in here that correspond with just the users that exist in that container. The neat part about these is that the creation of these allows you to just drop this into Microsoft Excel, make some changes that you may require, perhaps use it as a template to create an additional list of users that you may want to import. And then when it comes time to actually import in this information, you can use the same csv.de command, csv.de, with the -i switch to go ahead and import in an additional file, so output2.csv. Now, I'm not going to hit the enter button here because I don't want to import in additional records that I already have, but this is the process that you could go through using csv.de to export and import information in and out of Active Directory. Now, there's one other command that's similar to csv.de. I won't go into as much detail with this other command, called ldiff.de. The only main difference here is that ldiff.de provides many of the same functions as csv.de does, except the output format for ldiff.de will be not in the CSV format, but the ldiff format. So if I wanted to do a sample export of my current domain so you could see what the ldiff format looks like, I'd do ldiff.de-f and then output3.ldf. And once I've taken a look at that, let's do a notepad output3.ldf. And we can take a look at just how this differentiates, or how this differs from what we saw before in the commerce separated values format. As you can see, this is not so much a table, but a long list of all the different records and the characteristics associated with those records. And depending on what format you prefer, you can use CSV or ldiff.de to perform these bulk Active Directory operations. Now, I can't go and show you all the command line tools without delving into the PowerShell a bit, because these non-PowerShell tools are, if they're not deprecated, it's likely that they will be deprecated at some point as Microsoft continues its embrace with Windows PowerShell. So I want to show you how I can take the CSV file, or a slightly reformatted version of a CSV file, and then use that as an input for a PowerShell command so that I can create new users via that mechanism. Let's go ahead and close this output 3 here, and let me clear the screen so that I can show you just an additional CSV file that I've created. And in fact, if I minimize this and minimize this, I can show you that CSV file here. All I've done is taken the variety of different column names that I'm interested in and populated them here into a CSV file so that I can create 3 different users. This provides a great example of a situation where, for example, your human resources department may want to give you a spreadsheet of different users to have you create Active Directory accounts from that information. That spreadsheet could very easily be converted into a CSV file, and as long as you have the appropriate column titles up here, you'll be able to enter them in here into Active Directory as part of this new AD user command. So let me show you here, back here in PowerShell, how we might go about actually accomplishing that. If we take a look again at the new AD user command, and I show you the help on it, we can take a look at all the different possible parameters that correspond with the fields for a particular Active Directory user, like employee ID or certificates or the authentication policy or the auth type or the country. If I have a CSV file that includes the appropriate column titles with the information correctly configured for that column title, I can pipe that information as content into the new AD user account to create multiple accounts in bulk. Let's see how we might do that. Let me come back over here, and I'm going to import in the CSV file that we just created before. And the CSV file I'm looking for actually is going to be in users administrator desktop. So there's the file I'm looking at. Let's do import CSV and then new users.csv. That's the file I'm looking for. And I'm going to pipe that into the new AD user account. New AD user. If everything's been done correctly, this should automatically create those 3 users in Active Directory with all the characteristics, the field values populated that I included in that CSV. If I come over here to Active Directory users and computers, and you'll see I've created an organizational unit here called bulk users just as a place to store these accounts. And I hit the F5 to refresh things. Yep, there are my 3 users that I just created. User test 1, user test 2, and user test 3. Now, there are going to be some caveats here in doing this. There are some types of things you just can't pipe in. Passwords are one that require a little extra effort. There can be some other complex object types that may require extra effort as well. You also need to create an organizational unit here as opposed to just a container in Active Directory to support where these things need to get targeted to. But I wanted to show you this just to give you a feel for how you might be able to construct the kinds of bulk Active Directory operations that you might need with little more than an Excel spreadsheet and a really well-crafted PowerShell command.